The hologram flickered 3 times before it died completely, leaving Ambassador Rila standing alone in the dark council chamber. She had just watched the final transmission from the Mori homeworld. 20 billion people. Gone in 6 weeks. Rila was old, even by Veloci standards. Her pale blue skin had faded to almost white over her 400 years of life. She had seen wars. She had seen famines. She had seen empires rise and fall across 1,000-star systems. But she had never seen anything like this. The plague had no name at first. It started in the outer reaches, in a small mining colony that nobody cared about. The workers there began coughing blood. Then their organs failed. Then they died. All of them. Every single one. Within a month, it had spread to 3 more systems. Within 3 months, it had reached the core worlds. The Galactic Council called emergency sessions. Scientists from every species worked together. They tried everything. Nothing worked. The disease was too smart. It learned. It adapted. Every time they found a treatment, the plague changed itself. It was like fighting water with your bare hands. Rila walked slowly to the great window of the council chamber. Outside, she could see the lights of the station stretching into the darkness of space. Beautiful. Peaceful. Alive. 7 species were already gone. Not reduced. Not damaged. Gone. Extinct. Their worlds were silent now. Their cities stood empty. Their children would never laugh again. The door behind her opened with a soft hiss. She did not turn around. "Ambassador," said a voice. Human. Female. Young. "The council is ready to begin." Rila finally turned. The human woman standing in the doorway was short, with dark hair pulled back from her tired face. Her name was Dr. Ava Lindgren. She worked at the Galactic Health Institute, one of the few places still trying to find a cure. "Is there any point?" Rila asked. Her voice was hollow. "We have been meeting for 18 months. We have achieved nothing." Dr. Lindgren stepped into the room. "We have to keep trying." "Why?" "So we can watch more species die while we argue about resources." Rila shook her head. "The Keth are down to their last million. The Veloci, my own people, have lost 60% of our population." And now, she could not finish the sentence. The doctor Lindgren finished it for her. "And now Earth has its first confirmed case." Rila looked at the human with something close to pity. "I'm sorry. Truly. Your species was kind to us when we first made contact. You did not deserve this fate." "We're not dead yet," Dr. Lindgren said. "You will be. Everyone dies from this plague. The mortality rate is absolute." The council session that followed was chaos. Ambassadors shouted at each other. Accusations flew across the chamber. Some blamed the outer reach colonies for not containing the outbreak. Others blamed the council for not acting fast enough. A few even blamed humanity, claiming that humans had somehow created the plague as a weapon. Commodore Basu, the senior human military officer present, stood up to respond to that accusation. He was a tall man with gray hair and calm eyes. He spoke quietly, but his voice carried across the chamber. "If we had created this plague," he said, "why would we let it reach Earth? Our own people are dying right now. In Mumbai, in Lagos, in dozens of other cities. We are victims, just like everyone else." The accusations stopped, but the despair remained. Rila took her turn to speak. She stood at the central podium and looked out at the assembled ambassadors. So few of them now. So many empty seats. "My friends," she said, "I have lived a long time. I have always believed that the galaxy would endure, that no matter what challenges we faced, we would find a way. But this plague, it adapts too quickly. Our immune systems cannot keep up. I fear that we are watching the end of everything we have built." She paused. Her next words were the hardest she had ever spoken. "I think we should begin preparing for the possibility that there will be no survivors. We should record our histories, our cultures, our songs and stories, so that if any species somehow survives, they will know that we existed, that we mattered." Silence filled the chamber. Some ambassadors wept. Others simply stared at nothing. The doctor Lindgren raised her hand. "I would like to request access to all medical data from every affected species." Rila looked at her with tired eyes. "What good will that do?" "I don't know yet, but I won't stop trying until I'm dead." The council voted to grant her request. It was a small thing, a meaningless gesture, most thought. Humanity would be gone within weeks, just like everyone else. As the session ended and the ambassadors filed out, Rila stopped beside Dr. Lindgren. "You are brave," she said. "Foolish, perhaps, but brave." Dr. Lindgren smiled, though there was no joy in it. "On Earth, we have a saying, it's not over until it's over." Rilla did not understand what that meant, but she would remember those words. She would remember them when the impossible happened, when the species that everyone had written off as dead refused to die, because humanity was about to do something that no one in the galaxy expected. They were about to survive. Nurse Priya Nair had not slept in 47 hours. Her hands shook as she pulled on fresh gloves. Her eyes burned. Her feet ached. But there was no time to rest. There was never time to rest anymore. The hospital in Mumbai had been overwhelmed since day one. Patients filled every bed, every hallway, every waiting room. Makeshift tents had been set up in the parking lot. Still, more people kept coming. Priya moved through the ward, checking on patients. An old man with kind eyes. A young mother holding her sleeping child. A teenager who reminded her of her own brother. All of them infected. All of them waiting to find out if they would live or die. The plague had reached Earth 2 weeks ago. The first case was a dock worker who had been near an alien cargo ship. Within days, the disease had spread across the city. Within a week, it was on every continent. The world had panicked. Governments closed borders. People hoarded food and medicine. Some prayed. Some rioted. Everyone waited for the end. But the end did not come down on the 14th day. Something strange happened. The death rate stopped climbing. In other species, the plague killed 98% of those infected, sometimes more. But in humans, the number was different, 0.4%. At first, nobody believed it. The data must be wrong. The testing must be flawed. But as the days passed, the truth became impossible to deny. Humans were not dying like the others. Humans were fighting back. Dr. Ava Lindgren stood in front of a wall of screens in her research facility. Data scrolled across each one. Infection rates, recovery rates, antibody counts. She had not left this room in 3 days. "It doesn't make sense," said her assistant, a young man named Sanjay. "The plague adapts to every immune system. It learns how to beat every defense. Why can't it beat ours?" Ava stared at the numbers. She had asked herself the same question 1,000 times. And slowly, an answer had begun to form. "Because we're monsters," she said. Sanjay looked at her like she had lost her mind. "What?" Ava turned to face him. "Think about Earth's history. Think about what our ancestors survived. Ice ages that lasted thousands of years. Plagues that killed half of Europe. Diseases that wiped out entire civilizations. Famines. Wars. Radiation. Pollution. Our planet has been trying to kill us since the day we evolved." She pointed at the screens. Most species in the galaxy developed on stable worlds. Predictable climates. Consistent environments. Their immune systems never had to adapt the way ours did. They never had to fight the way we fight. Sanjay's eyes widened. "So our immune system is battle-hardened, paranoid, aggressive. It's used to facing new threats. It's used to enemies that change tactics. This plague is fast and smart, but our bodies have been fighting fast and smart enemies for millions of years." The news spread across the galaxy within hours. Humans were surviving. Not all of them, but most of them. And those who recovered were completely immune. Ambassador Rila watched the reports from her quarters on the station. Her hands trembled as she read the numbers again and again. She had watched 12 species die. She had prepared herself to watch a 13th. But instead, she was watching a miracle. Back on Earth, Priya continued her rounds. The old man with kind eyes was getting better. His fever had broken. His coughing had stopped. He looked up at her with tears in his eyes. "Am I going to live?" he asked. Priya smiled. It was the first real smile she had managed in weeks. "Yes, you're going to live." In the days that followed, the recoveries multiplied. Hospitals that had been morgues became places of hope again. People who had said goodbye to their families woke up hungry and confused and alive. General Okonkwo, the military liaison for the World Health Organization, called an emergency meeting with Dr. Lindgren. The alien delegations are asking questions, he said. They want to know how we did it. Ava shook her head. We didn't do anything. We just survived, the same way we always have. They don't understand that. To them, we look invincible. We're not invincible. We're just stubborn. Okonkwo leaned forward. They're going to want our help. Every dying species in the galaxy is going to come to us, asking us to save them. Ava was quiet for a long moment. She thought about the data she had gathered, the antibodies that recovered patients were producing, the unique proteins that seemed to neutralize the plague. Then we should start figuring out how, she said. That night, Priya finally went home. She stood in her small apartment and looked out the window at the city lights. Mumbai was still standing. Earth was still spinning. Humanity was still here. She did not know what would come next. She did not know if they could save anyone else. But for the first time since the plague arrived, she felt something she had forgotten was possible. She felt hope. And across the galaxy, in dying hospitals on dying worlds, the news of humanity's survival spread like fire. The species that everyone had written off as just another victim had become something else entirely. They had become the last chance. The child was blue, not from sickness, but because that was the natural color of Veloshi's skin. She was small, barely reaching Ava's waist, with large dark eyes that seemed too old for her young face. She held her father's hand tightly as they walked through the processing center that had been set up at the Geneva airport. Ava watched them pass. Behind them came more Veloshi. Then a group of Keth, their scale bodies wrapped in protective suits. Then species she had never seen before, species from the far edges of known space. All of them sick, all of them desperate, all of them looking at the humans around them with the same expression, the hope that it had been 6 weeks since humanity's survival became known. In that time, everything had changed. Alien ships filled Earth's orbit. Refugee camps spread across every continent. The planet that had once been a quiet backwater of the galaxy was now its most important destination. Everyone wanted human help. Human blood, human medicine, human salvation. Kai stood in line at the volunteer center in Stockholm. He was 23 years old, a university student who had been studying engineering before the plague arrived. Now his studies seemed meaningless. How could he worry about exams when entire species were going extinct? The line moved slowly. When he reached the front, a tired nurse asked him a series of questions. Had he been infected? Yes. Had he recovered? Yes. Was he willing to participate in experimental treatments? Kai did not hesitate. Yes. They took 12 vials of his blood that day. They would take more in the days that followed. Much more in the research facility outside Geneva. Dr. Lindgren worked with a team of scientists from 30 different species. The Galactic Cure Initiative, they called it. A grand name for a desperate project. The problem was simple to describe, but impossible to solve. Human antibodies could neutralize the plague, but human antibodies were designed for human bodies. They did not work the same way in alien biology. Director Mbeki, the head of the initiative, called a meeting to discuss their progress. Or rather, their lack of progress. We've tested the base treatment on 47 Veloshi subjects, reported a Keth scientist. 32 showed improvement. 15 showed no response. The cure works, but not consistently. What about the Mori subjects? Asked Mbeki silence. Then, quietly, there are no Mori subjects. There are no Mori left. The room fell silent. Another species gone. Another empty seat at the table. Ava stood up. We need to adapt the treatment for each species individually. One size doesn't fit all. We need to understand each species' immune system well enough to modify our antibodies accordingly. That will take years, someone objected. Decades, maybe. Species are dying now. Then we work faster. They worked faster. They barely slept. They pushed themselves past every limit they had ever known. And slowly, painfully, they began to make progress. The first successful alien treatment was administered to a Veloshi elder named Tomas. He had been hours from death when they injected him with the modified antibodies. For 12 terrible hours, nothing happened. Then his fever broke. Then his organs stabilized. Then he opened his eyes. He looked at the human doctor standing beside his bed and spoke a single word in heavily accented English. Thank you. News of the success spread quickly. But with hope came other things. Demands, accusations, politics that ate the United Nations. Ambassador Rila stood before the assembled delegates. Her species had been reduced to 800,000 survivors. She had lost her husband, her brother, two of her 3 children. The third was in a human hospital, fighting for her life. I know that some of my colleagues blame humanity for this plague, she said. Her voice was steady, but her hand shook. I know that some believe you created it, or that you are withholding the cure for your own benefit. I'm here to tell you that this is wrong. She pulled out a small device and activated it. A hologram appeared above the assembly, showing a young Veloci girl lying in a hospital bed. Tubes and wires connected her to machines. Her eyes were closed. This is my daughter. She is 7 years old. Yesterday, a human woman named Priya sat with her for 6 hours because I could not be there. She held my daughter's hand. She sang to her. She promised her that everything would be okay. Rila's voice finally cracked. Humans did not have to help us. They could have closed their borders. They could have protected only themselves. Instead, they opened their homes. They gave their blood. They are working themselves to death, trying to save species they only met a few years ago. She looked directly at the human delegates. We can never repay what you are doing for us. But I swear to you, we will never forget it. In Stockholm, Kai collapsed during his 19th blood donation. The doctors rushed to help him. He had given too much, pushed too hard. His body was failing. They carried him to the medical bay. He grabbed a nurse's arm. Don't stop, he whispered. Keep using my blood. Keep trying. Then his eyes closed. He did not know that his antibodies were special. That something in his specific biology made them more compatible with alien systems than anyone else's. That his blood would become the key to saving millions, that he only knew that he wanted to help. And that was enough. The Keth ambassador had no name anymore. Among his people, names were earned through family and community. But his family was dead. His community was gone. He was the last of 50 billion souls, and he had no one left to call him anything at all. He sat in a small office at the research facility, helping human scientists understand Keth biology. He drew diagrams of their organ systems. He explained their immune responses. He answered every question, no matter how painful. Why do you help us? Asked a young researcher named Nina. Your people are already gone. Nothing we do will bring them back. The ambassador was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke, his translator turning his clicking language into English. Because others might still be saved. Because my people would have wanted me to help, even at the end. And because... He paused. Because you asked. No one else asked. You humans were the only ones who came to us and said, how can we help? Even when you were dying too. Captain Yuki Tanaka stood on the bridge of the humanitarian ship Mercy. Around her, a fleet of 200 vessels moved through space toward the Veloci homeworld. Each ship carried medical supplies, doctors, nurses, and most importantly, the cure. Not a complete cure. Not yet, but enough to save some. Enough to matter. Captain, said her communications officer, we're receiving a transmission from a surface. The view screen flickered. A Veloci official appeared, his blue face gaunt and tired. Human vessels, you're cleared for landing. We have prepared reception areas at the following coordinates. He paused, his voice breaking. We cannot thank you enough. We have been praying for help. We did not expect it to come from humans. Tanaka nodded. We're coming as fast as we can. Hold on. Back on Earth, Dr. Lindgren stared at a screen showing their progress. 12 species saved so far. 3 more on the edge. 6 more that they might reach in time. And the list of the dead kept growing. The Fenari had fallen yesterday. A peaceful species known for their music. 8 billion voices silenced forever. Ava felt a hand on her shoulder. She turned to find General Okonkwo standing behind her. You need to rest, he said. I can't rest. Every hour we delay, thousands more die. And if you collapse from exhaustion, you won't be able to help anyone. He guided her to a chair. Sit. Eat something. That's an order. She sat. She did not eat. "We're not going fast enough," she said. "The cure works, but we can't produce it fast enough. We can't distribute it fast enough. We can't adapt it fast enough. You're doing the impossible. No one expected you to do it perfectly." Tell that to the Fenari. In Stockholm, Kai lay in a coma. The doctors did not know if he would wake up. They only knew that his blood was producing antibodies that worked on almost every species they tested. Something about his genetic makeup, his specific immune response, made him special. They called him the universal donor. They took as much blood as they safely could, then a little more. His body kept producing antibodies, even unconscious. Even dying, his parents sat beside his bed, holding his hands. They did not understand why their son had pushed himself so hard. They only knew that he had wanted to help, and that he had given everything he had. Captain Tanaka's fleet reached the Veloci homeworld and began the largest medical operation in human history. Doctors worked around the clock. Nurses collapsed from exhaustion and were replaced by fresh volunteers who had traveled across the galaxy to help. The cure worked. Not on everyone, but on most. People who had been hours from death slowly recovered. Children opened their eyes. Parents held their families again, but it was not enough. It was never enough on the third day. Tanaka received a message from a small colony at the edge of Veloci space. They had run out of supplies. They were begging for help. "How many survivors?" Tanaka asked. "Approximately 12,000. But they won't last another week without treatment." Tanaka looked at her supply manifest. They were already stretched thin. Sending ships to the colony meant reducing supplies elsewhere. "Do it," she said. "Send 3 ships. We'll figure out the rest." They always figure out the rest. They had .I in the research facility. A breakthrough came at 3 in the morning. Nina, the young researcher who had questioned the Keth ambassador, discovered a way to create a universal base cure. A foundation that could be quickly modified for any species. She ran to find Dr. Lindgren, who had fallen asleep at her desk. "Ava, wake up. I found it." Ava jerked awake, her heart pounding. "Found what?" "The answer, or at least part of it. Look." They spent the next 6 hours testing Nina's discovery. It worked. Not perfectly, but faster than anything they had tried before. Instead of weeks to adapt the cure for each species, they could do it in days. The news reached the Galactic Council within hours. For the first time in 2 years, there was real hope. Not just the desperate kind that people clung to in the dark. Real, scientific, provable hope. Ambassador Rilla wept when she heard. Her daughter had recovered 2 days earlier. Now, perhaps, her species could recover too. And in a hospital bed in Stockholm, Kai's eyes opened that he was weak. He could barely move, but he was alive. "Did it help?" he asked the nurse, standing beside him. "My blood. Did it help anyone?" The nurse smiled through her tears. "It helped everyone." Kai closed his eyes again, but this time he was smiling too. They were going to make it. Not all of them. Not everyone. But enough to matter. Rain fell on the tent city outside Berlin. It had been raining for 3 days. The refugees huddled under plastic shelters, waiting for medicine, waiting for food, waiting for news from their homeworlds. A Veloci woman sat on a crate, staring at nothing. Her name was Sila. She had been a teacher before the plague. She had taught history to young children, telling them stories about the great achievements of their species. Now she wondered if there would be any Veloci children left to teach. A human volunteer approached her with a cup of hot soup. He was young, maybe 20, with tired eyes and muddy boots. "Please eat," he said in broken Veloci. "You need strength." Sila took the cup, but did not drink. "Why do you help us?" The young man seemed confused by the question. "Because you need help, but we are strangers. We came to your world uninvited. We're using your resources, eating your food, taking your medicine. Some of your people must hate us." The volunteer sat down beside her. "Some do, but most of us, we just see people who are suffering. And when we see suffering, we want to help. It's just what we do." Sila finally took a sip of the soup. It was warm and good. Tears ran down her blue cheeks, mixing with the rain. Captain Tanaka's fleet had been in space for 4 months. They had visited 17 worlds. They had saved millions of lives. But they had also witnessed horrors that none of them would ever forget. The worst was the Vena homeworld. They arrived too late. The plague had already run its course. The cities were silent. The streets were empty. Billions of people had died in their homes, their workplaces, their hospitals. The entire planet was a graveyard. Tanaka ordered her crew to collect genetic samples, cultural artifacts, anything that could preserve some memory of the Vena civilization. They worked in silence, walking through dead streets, entering homes where families had died together. A young ensign found a child's toy on the ground, a small stuffed creature that might have been an animal from the Vena homeworld. He picked it up and held it for a long moment before placing it carefully in his collection. BAG. And O1 spoke on the shuttle back to the ship. No one needed to die on Earth. The toll was growing heavy. Human volunteers were burning out. Doctors who had worked 20-hour days for months were collapsing. The constant pressure, the endless need, was breaking people. Dr. Lindgren called a meeting of her senior staff. They looked like ghosts, pale and hollow-eyed. "We need to pace ourselves," she said. "We can't save anyone if we're dead." "Easy to say," replied one of her colleagues. "Try telling that to the refugees outside who are watching their families die." "I know. Believe me, I know. But we have to think long-term. This isn't a sprint. It's a marathon. We need to set up sustainable systems, training programs, supply chains. We can't run this operation on desperation forever." They argued for hours. In the end, they agreed to implement shift limits and mandatory rest periods. Some people ignored them. Ava was one of them. In the refugee camps, tensions were rising. Some humans had begun to resent the aliens. Why should Earth bear the burden of the entire galaxy? Why should human resources go to strangers while human problems went unsolved? Protests formed outside government buildings. Some turned violent. The news showed burning cars and shouting crowds. Ambassador Rila watched the coverage from her quarters with a heavy heart. She understood the anger. She even sympathized with it. Humans were sacrificing so much. It was natural that some would question why. She requested permission to address the protesters directly. Against the advice of her security team, she walked into the crowd outside the United Nations building in New York. The shouting stopped. People stared at this small blue woman walking toward them without guards or weapons. "I know you are angry," she said, her voice carrying through the sudden silence. "I know you feel that your world has been invaded by strangers who demand your help. And you are right to feel that way." She looked around at the faces watching her. Some were hostile. Some were curious. All were listening. "But I want you to understand something. When the plague began, many species looked for someone to blame. Some blamed each other. Some blamed themselves. And some blamed humanity." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. There were voices in the Galactic Council who wanted to quarantine Earth, to cut you off from a galaxy and let you die alone. They said humans were too primitive to matter, too young, too weak. She paused. "But when the plague reached Earth, your people did not hide. They did not hoard the cure for themselves. They opened their doors. They gave their blood. They sent their ships across the galaxy to help people they had never met." Her voice grew stronger. "You could have let us die. No one would have blamed you. But you chose to save us instead. That is not weakness. That is strength. That is the kind of strength the galaxy has never seen before." The crowd was silent now. Some people were crying. "I cannot promise that your sacrifice will be repaid. I cannot promise that things will be fair. But I can promise you this. The galaxy will never forget what humanity did during the long night. Never." She turned and walked back toward the building. Behind her, someone started clapping. Then another person. Then the whole crowd. The protests did not stop entirely after that. But they grew smaller, quieter. Something had shifted in the tense city outside Berlin. Sela finished her soup and handed the cup back to the young volunteer. "Thank you," she said, "for the soup. And for everything else." He smiled. "You're welcome. We're going to get through this together. Together." It was such a simple word, but it meant everything. The long night was not over yet. But dawn was coming. They could feel it. 5 years had passed since the last death from the plague. 5 years of healing. 5 years of rebuilding. 5 years of learning how to live in a galaxy that had nearly died. The memorial ceremony was held on the old Galactic Council station, which had been transformed into a museum and monument. Representatives from every surviving species had gathered to mark the anniversary. Behind them, the names of the dead scrolled across massive screens. It would take 3 days for all the names to pass. Dr. Ava Lindgren stood at the podium. Her hair had gone gray during the crisis years. Lines had carved themselves into her face. But her eyes were still sharp, still determined. "Today we remember," she said. "We remember the 19 species who did not survive. The Mori, the Vena, the Fenari, and 16 others whose names we speak with sorrow and respect." She paused, letting the weight of those words settle over the assembly. "We also remember the 23 species who did survive, who fought through the darkest night our galaxy has ever known and emerged into the dawn." In the audience, Ambassador Rila sat beside her daughter, now 12 years old and healthy. The girl who had almost died in a human hospital was now learning to speak English, planning to study medicine on Earth when she was old enough. When the plague began, Ava continued. Many thought it was the end, and for billions of people it was. But for those of us who survived, it was also a beginning, a chance to build something new, something better. The galaxy had changed in ways no one could have predicted. Earth had become the medical capital of known space. Human doctors worked on every inhabited world. Human research ships explored the far reaches, searching for new diseases to study, new cures to develop. But it was not just about medicine. The plague had broken down barriers that had stood for centuries. Species that had been rivals for generations now worked together. Old grudges had been set aside. Old hatreds had been forgotten. When everyone is dying, it becomes hard to remember why you were angry at each other. Kai sat in the third row, still thin and pale from his years of treatment. His body had never fully recovered from the strain he had put it through. The doctors said he would always be fragile. He did not mind. He had given everything he had, and it had been enough. Beside him sat Nina, the researcher who had discovered the universal cure. They had gotten married 2 years ago in a small ceremony attended by humans and aliens alike. Their wedding photo showed them surrounded by friends from 6 different species, all smiling. "Some have asked me what the most important thing was," Ava said. "What single factor made the difference? Was it our immune systems? Our technology? Our resources?" She shook her head. "It was none of those things. The most important thing was that we chose to help. We chose to open our doors when we could have closed them. We chose to give when we could have hoarded. We chose to see strangers as family when we could have seen them as threats. In the refugee camps that had once covered Earth, new cities were growing. Aliens who had come as desperate survivors were now citizens, neighbors, friends. Their children played with human children. Their cultures blended with human cultures, creating something new and strange and beautiful. The Keth ambassador, still nameless, had spent the last 5 years writing a history of his people. Everything he could remember, every story, every song, every tradition. It would be published next month in 12 languages. He had dedicated it to the human researchers who had asked him how they could help, even when there was no one left to save. "I want to close with something personal," Ava said. 5 years ago, I was ready to give up. I thought we were all going to die. I thought everything we had built was going to disappear. But someone reminded me that it's not over until it's over." She looked out at the audience, at Rila, at Kai, at the countless faces from countless worlds who had come to remember and to hope. She was right. It wasn't over. And now, standing here today, I can say something I never thought I would be able to say. She smiled. It was a tired smile, but a real one. We made it. The ceremony ended with the unveiling of a new statue in the Memorial Plaza. It showed a human figure reaching down to lift up a fallen alien. The species of the alien was deliberately unclear, designed to represent all of them. The inscription at the base was simple. They did not have to save us. They chose to. Kai and Nina walked through the plaza after the crowds had gone. The screens were still scrolling names. They would scroll for 2 more days. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened?" Nina asked. "If we hadn't survived? If the plague had killed us like everyone else?" Kai thought about it. "Sometimes. But then I think about all the people who are alive now because we did survive. All the children who will grow up. All the cultures that will continue. And I think maybe this is how it was supposed to be. You believe in fate. I believe in choices. We chose to help. That's what mattered. They stood in silence, watching the names scroll past. Each one represented a life, a story, a universe that had ended too soon. But there were also names that weren't on those screens. Names of people who had survived, who had been saved by human blood and human sacrifice and human stubbornness. Those names would never stop growing. New generations would be born. New stories would begin. The dead would be remembered, and the living would honor them by continuing to live. That night, on every world that had been touched by the plague, people lit candles and placed them in their windows. Billions of tiny lights scattered across a galaxy that had nearly gone dark. The long night was over. But the light it had kindled would burn forever.